You jib a jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. You jib a jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn.
Good evening and welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. And tonight, a little conversation about transparency in government. Are we getting enough? Remember, Obama came in promising a new wave of transparency. How do you do it right? How do you do it wrong? We're going to find out from the Independence Institute. Ben DeGrow, who works in our Education Policy Center, who's been following this not only here in Colorado, but around the country.
Glad to be here, John.
Nice beard. Don't shave it.
Thank you.
Got that evil Spock thing going?
Good advice.
Yeah, just get the eyebrows going. And from Jeffco County Schools, Lorie Gillis, who's their CFO, which means you're the accountant, the glorified accountant.
That's correct.
All right. I tell you what, before we get into all the details of what's going on at Jefferson County Schools on transparency, give people an idea. Transparency sounds nice, and it's a great thing that politicians always say, we're for transparency, nobody's against transparency. Nobody knows exactly what transparency is. Give me a good definition.
When we're talking about financial transparency in governments, whether it's at the federal, state, or local level, and what we're basically asking in this movement that's kind of going on around the country and really picking up speed in Colorado is for governments to provide that financial information that's already available. If you're a citizen and went down and asked for it with a public records request, we're just asking that governments take the initiative and put it online so people can see it there.
Every government, here in Colorado, we've got some 3,300 governments when you put in special districts, cities, counties, school boards, school districts. And they all, you pop up the financials, you can go online and you can see how big their budget is, you can see kind of the departments where they're spent. Why isn't, that's transparency, isn't it?
Well, what that is aggregated spending, or combining it together in ways that you can't necessarily see the kind of detail that might bring more accountability to the process. And so what we're asking with financial transparency is to show the line item expenditure from the checkbook or from the credit card, to show what you're purchasing with supplies, et cetera. So,
in other words, since we have here in Colorado this great sunshine law, we've got great open records laws, anything that we want to see in government, we really can, except for a few personnel files and a couple very sensitive court documents. But if you want to see, for instance, in Jefferson County Schools, if you want to see how much they spent on pencils, I want to see your check register, that's always been pretty hard to do unless you wanted to pay them to give you the information. You have to go down, you write them a check, they give you the stuff, and you could look through it.
It has, but what's neat about now is that the technology that's available makes it possible for school districts or county governments to go ahead and put that online in a way that not only is all the information on there online, but what Jefferson County has done really well is presented in a manner that's easy for you to break it down and user-friendly information.
And all this information is public information anyway, right? It's not like we're opening up books that can't be opened. It's just making it easy to access without having to go down and write out a formal request. You just go online and you can look at this stuff.
Absolutely. It's just making those public records more accessible.
Before we go to what you've done now in Jefferson County and really taken a lead in transparency, before that, there were citizen activists that would do exactly what Ben talked about, which would be write out a check and say, give me your check register. And you would, of course, have to give them your check register. Some of the activists, Natalie Menton comes to mind in Lakewood, would take that check register, put it online herself, so people like me could go and take a look at it. How did that work?
Well, that worked out okay, and we provided the information. There was never really any resistance at all to provide that information, but when we provided the data to Natalie Menton and other citizens, we provided very raw data with very little information behind that data. So when our citizens were looking at information, they really didn't have the details behind or the explanation even at the high level of what those expenditures related to. So there were oftentimes misperceptions, misconceptions about what the dollars were being spent on.
Everything, and it was right, because I remember looking at that, and for instance, she'd put it online in kind of a searchable database, and it was your check register, and I could say, show me every check to Domino's Pizza, or to Chuck E. Cheese, or to any other place, and you'd see it, and all of a sudden you could say, look, Jeffco School District has spent $10,000 at Starbucks Coffee House. Isn't this a waste of money? And for a hawk like me, that gives me red meat to go after and go, look at this, look what you're doing. What was the error in my calculation by doing so?
By not understanding and using the Starbucks as an example, those expenditures could have been on, and Starbucks was an example, for a fundraising purpose. So we may have purchased the coffee, but we were reimbursed for those coffee purchases on most occasions if it was fundraising related. Same with the Dominos, could have been for our food services department for lunches for our students, but without the information of what those expenditures were for, what fund they were from, you didn't know that. You didn't know that it was not taxpayer dollars. You didn't know that it was reimbursed.
In other words, for the Domino's pizza, you might have had an incredible thing where parents would come to the soccer game, they would buy the pizzas, but the money would pass through the school district, or the band had an event and people bought pizzas, but you guys bought it, or you serve the pizza in your cafeterias and you got a deal from Domino's. But I would not know that by having the large open record request.
That's correct.
All right. But did that type of website, having a citizen activist take all that information, make it available online, was that an incentive to do it right?
Sure. It helped us understand quickly and more loud and clear what our citizens were looking for and how they would misunderstand information if they weren't given enough of the details to follow through. So even though we felt we had been transparent and provided the information timely and readily to folks, it really was a demonstration that that information could be pushed out into the public in a way that wasn't useful. And our intent is to make our information useful and help folks understand, because it isn't good for the schools, it isn't good for the community, the parents, for anybody to be thinking we're spending tax dollars unwisely.
Not to say you aren't spending tax dollars unwisely, you might well be, but what you're saying is if you're going to do this, by having control of it yourself, you can show exactly what every penny is used for. And so if I have a question, instead of calling you up screaming, why are you spending $20,000 for pizza, you can say, well, the reason is this, and it's online.
Right, and it gives them the context of the information when they go into the database. The explanations are in the front before you start pulling information out, so you know when you're looking for that information, when you're getting into the details, where that funding is coming from.
I want to get into your new website in just a second, because
okay.
I mean it's getting a lot of national attention as a website and a transparency project that's worth replicating, because here it is, it can be done. But last legislative session there was some push to try to make these websites available through governments throughout Colorado, and more importantly through the state government. I remember that the governor said in his State of the State last year, we're going to put forward a transparency project, which kind of echoed what the president said about transparency. It sounded good, but it never really happened until a law went in effect. What happened there?
Right. Starting with the state transparency, and I'll say this, that the state of Colorado could learn a lot from what Jeffco's done. If you've seen their so-called transparency website, it's not nearly as detailed or user-friendly as what some of these local governments like Jefferson County Schools are doing. There was another bill last year that was going to essentially make school districts do what Jeffco has done now, and that was Senate Bill 57. Said put all that information out online in a way that's very user-friendly for people to be able to search, keep the data online so they can access it for so many years. And what they didn't expect, I don't even think the sponsor of the bill expected, was the public grassroots outcry for transparency that like 20 people showed up in the first hearing to testify for transparency, and it kind of evidenced the fact that there is this consumer demand out here for more transparency from local governments.
From a 30,000-foot level, what's great about transparency on that type of micro level? The ability to say, I want to see how much you're spending at these shops. I want to know what's on your credit cards. I want to see this stuff. It's public record anyway, but except for a few gadflies out there, like me, who would go up there and say, I want to see this stuff, really, who's going to look at this? Why is this good public policy?
Sure. Now, not everybody is going to be interested in looking at the information, but what it does is it widens the circle of accountability, is how I like to describe it. More people have their eyes on how the government agency is spending their money. When you put that sunshine on there, it gives an incentive to the school district or the county to spend the money in a way that's wise and fruitful, and and maybe helps if there's mistakes in the process. It helps bring in the citizens to say, look, you're not doing this right, or maybe they say you could be spending this money more efficiently, and here's how.